Welcome to the day after talking Duck sports. And I know that Oregon didn't have a game, but there was still action happening, so there's still stuff to talk about. Um, I want to look at the current rankings, the top five teams' future schedules, and then we'll talk about if Dan Lanning has a Penn State coaching issue with the big games and being on the hot seat. So stay tuned, and we'll get to that. But first up, let's check out some rankings. So after Oregon's bye week, they drop one spot in the polls to number 3. With some losses, Indiana moves up to number 7, so it's a 3 versus 7. And then with Texas losing, Oklahoma and the Red Rivalry is not the same game, so ESPN Game Day will be at number 3 versus number 7, Oregon versus Indiana in Eugene. Game Day will be there. It'll be another spectacle, and I expect the Autzen crowd to do what the Autzen crowd does and represent. So we got Ohio State at number 1, Miami number 2, Oregon number 3, Ole Miss number 4, Texas A&M number 5, Oklahoma number 6, Indiana number 7, Alabama number 8, Texas Tech number 9, and Georgia rounds up the top 10 there. So, the usual suspects in the top 10, other than Texas A&M. That's a little bit of a surprise, I guess. And I guess Texas Tech historically hasn't really been there. But seems to be shaken out. There's just a lot of parity right now in college football. So let's go ahead and take a look. So, Ohio State has number 17 Illinois, and then they go back-to-back Illinois, Wisconsin. Wisconsin not the same team. And then they get Penn State at home. Penn State seems to have let Oregon beat them twice and lost to unranked UCLA over the weekend, which kind of puts a stain on that Oregon victory there. They got Purdue, UCLA, which it's hard to know if UCLA has turned a corner or if they just caught Penn State at the right time. So we'll see about that. They got Rutgers, and then, the Ohio State-Michigan game is always a coin flip, and so we'll see what happens there. All right, got Miami's schedule. They got Louisville, and then Stanford at home. They go to SMU. They got Syracuse, NC State, and then they go to Virginia Tech and Pittsburgh. They have a pretty weak schedule going off the rest of the year. I don't know, maybe that Pittsburgh game, but I don't really see anybody threatening Miami the rest of the time. But it is Mario Cristobal, and they are, and he is used to losing games that he shouldn't. So you never know. I still expect Miami to lose one game in this somewhere. All right, you got Ole Miss. A little bit of a surprise. I knew they would be good. I didn't know that they would be as good as they have shown. But they're going to absolutely wall up Washington State. And then they get some matchups back-to-back. Struggle games against Georgia and Oklahoma is going to be very interesting for Ole Miss. This will really tell you if they're true contenders or not. If they can get both of those road wins, I think Ole Miss becomes one of the top teams to beat in NCAA. And then they got South Carolina, the Citadel. Okay. And I don't know, whatever we want. And then Florida, I don't know. Florida's showing some life, so that may be another game that gets a little bit difficult for Ole Miss. And they got Mississippi State at home. All right. So we got Texas A&M. And here's the thing is Florida has all of a sudden shown some fight. And so don't expect this game. I don't expect this Texas A&M Florida game to be a blowout. I expect Florida to maybe put some pressure on Texas A&M and make them play. Luckily for A&M, they get Florida at home. And they got Arkansas, but then they have to go to LSU, and then Missouri is showing some fight also. So LSU is a hard place to win. So yeah, you got that. And then what is it with these SEC teams in late November playing nobodies? So they play Samford, And then Texas is basically nothing right now. They haven't shown anything. All right, let's look at Oregon. So they got Indiana game day, 12:30 on Saturday. This will be a very interesting game to see if Indiana is real and to see if Oregon can put up the points that they're going to need to put up against top defenses and top opposing teams. So I don't think by any means this is a give me game for Oregon. I think Oregon and Autzen Stadium are the final pins in the board, and I think Oregon wins by 10 points, but I think it's a late 10 points. I don't think it's a 10-point lead all the way throughout the game. You got Rutgers, which you got to go over there, but all these Oregon should easily win. The Iowa game is very interesting because Iowa is just a hard place to play, and that is a road game, but Oregon should be, favored in every one of those games, and Dan Lanning seems to be able to put his team together. Of course, last year Oregon went undefeated in the Big Ten, so I think they're looking pretty good. I think they taking one game at a time, not looking ahead. There's no games on this schedule that Oregon should be looking ahead. If anything, the Oregon State game would have been the trap game when them looking ahead to Penn State. I like how they had that bye week that Penn State didn't have. I think it lets Oregon come down from all that emotion and all that fight of that game. Allows them to reset and be ready for Indiana. So I think that was a really good time to get a bye week there. So that's what we're looking at the schedules. Now, let's talk about our man, Dan Lanning. So, as you know, Penn State's coach, Franklin, pretty sure that's what his name is, he has a lot of criticism about not being able to win the big game and faltering when it needs to be. But yet, they have a better record than Oregon has in the playoffs. So if you look at Oregon has been to 3 games in the playoff. Penn State has been to 3 games in the playoff. Previous coaches are 1-1, and Dan Lanning is 0-1 in the playoff. Penn State is 2-1 with their coach. So right now, you have Penn State's coach that has a better record in the playoff than you have for Dan Lanning, who is 0-1 in the playoff. So, now, don't get me wrong. I am very adamant about Dan Lanning will win a national title. I think Dan Lanning's a young coach that is doing really well. This team isn't the team that everybody expected to maybe compete for the title. They thought it was next year's team that would do that. But this team that they got right now is showing a lot of fortitude, and they look to be getting into the playoffs this year and may turn that around. But like I said, for an exercise, because I don't think this is a problem for Dan Lanning, but for an exercise, do you think that Oregon fan base, which historically has not put pressure on to fire coaches because as long as they're competitive, Oregon fan base has been willing to ride with you. Over the years, coaches have been able to stay as long as they've wanted to, pretty much, except for Helfrich, the real one that they kind of just got rid of. But if let's just say for this discussion is if Dan Lanning continues to get to the playoffs but can't win a national title, or maybe he can't win playoff games, do Oregon fans start getting upset and start calling for Dan Lanning's head? Or as long as Oregon is winning Big Ten titles or competing for Big Ten titles, do they just ride with Dan Lanning forever? Because I kind of think that that's really what it would be, is if Dan Lanning stays competitive, Dan Lanning's team always has a chance in the playoffs, Dan Lanning's team always has a chance to get to a national title game. ESPN's coming to Oregon for the big games, and Oregon's showing up for big games. I think they just keep Dan Lanning forever at that point. I don't think it's national title or bust, especially since Oregon has never won a national title. They played in a few championship games, but just couldn't get over the hump, or just couldn't get over the little knee being down or wasn't down or whatever, with that Auburn game. So I don't know. What do you think? Do you think Dan Lanning has to win a national title for Oregon to keep him long term? And if so, how long do they let that go? Because I don't think that's the case. But I'm interested to see what your comment is. If not, do you just think Dan Lanning's good to ride as long as he stays competitive? Because that's kind of what I think for Oregon is I think they have a lot of faith in Dan Lanning to keep Oregon competitive. And as long as Oregon's getting into the playoffs and has a chance, I don't think it really is going to matter what his playoff record is. So, thanks for joining me. Let me know, what do you think? Do you think that that Dan Lanning has to get those victories, or do you think that they're going to let Dan Lanning just ride it out and just keep winning in the regular season, just be competitive, and you can stay here long term? I kind of think that's what it's going to be, even though right now Oregon is 1-2 in the playoffs, played in that national title game. Right now you got Penn State at 2-1, and they're calling for the coach's head. So I don't know. With that, thanks for joining me. We will catch you next time, and let me know what you think. Much love, all.